My grandmother told me this story many times, and it still gives me goosebumps. She lived in Los Angeles in the 1950s. On Halloween night 1957, a family friend of hers, Peter Fabiano, was murdered at his own front door in what became known as the trick-or-treat slaying. I've since verified the details in old newspapers, and hearing Gran's personal connection made it all the more real. The way she recounts it, that Halloween, Peter and his wife, Betty, had finished handing out candy and gone to bed. Late, around 11 p.m., their doorbell rang. Betty was going to ignore it. Who comes that late except troublemakers? But Peter thought maybe it was some older kids playing a prank and insisted on answering. Betty stayed in bed, but listened. She heard Peter open the door and say, "Isn't it a little late for this?" His voice in a half-joking tone. Then a stranger's voice replied, "No." What followed was a deafening gunshot. Betty rushed downstairs in terror to find Peter lying on his back in the doorway, blood spreading on his pajama top. He'd been shot in the chest at point-blank range. The assailant was gone. All Betty glimpsed was a figure in some kind of costume fleeing into the night. Peter died on arrival at the hospital. The neighborhood was in an uproar, a beloved local businessman killed for no obvious reason, on Halloween of all nights. At first, everyone assumed it was a random madman in costume. Detectives noted that Peter's last words implied the person was dressed up, likely in a Halloween disguise, which lowered his guard. The investigation took a bizarre turn. Eventually, 2 women were arrested. One of them, Joan, was a former friend of Betty's. The other, Goldine, was the one who had dressed up in a costume, reports say possibly a mask or makeup, and pulled the trigger. It turned out to be a twisted tale of jealousy and love gone wrong. The women had plotted to kill Peter so Joan could have Betty to herself. It was heavily implied Joan was in love with Betty. They chose Halloween night specifically so they could wear a mask and blend in with trick-or-treaters, approaching the door without arousing suspicion. And it worked. Peter, ever the good sport with holiday revelers, opened the door and even smiled at his killer in the moments before he was shot. Ultimately, both women were caught and served prison time, but were released on parole after some years. Gran said that after this tragedy, Halloween was never the same in their community. Grown-ups whispered about the real monsters that had come out that night. People became wary of late-night knocks, and some friendships were irreparably damaged by the betrayal that had lurked beneath the surface. For me, the story is a haunting reminder that behind some costumes are human motives, darker than any ghost story. A man literally laughed and greeted what he thought was a harmless late trick-or-treater, only to be murdered in cold blood on his own porch. Now when I give out candy, and it gets past 9 p.m., I'm done. Lights off. And if the doorbell rings late, I think of Peter Fabiano. I'll peek carefully before opening up, or maybe I just won't answer at all. Halloween or not, you never know who might be there, and what their real intentions are. Halloween night can blur reality. Sometimes gruesome sights are fake props, and sometimes they're not. A few years ago, I had a chilling experience that began as a curious sight on my morning commute, right after Halloween. On November 1st, I was driving through a neighborhood a couple miles from my own. Many houses still had their decorations up from the night before. As I slowed near a stop sign, I noticed off to the side, next to a chain-link fence by an overgrown lot, there was what looked like a Halloween prop hanging on the fence. It appeared to be a person-shaped figure, dressed in tattered clothing, sort of slumped and caught on the chain links. Man, someone went all out, I thought. It looked disturbingly real. But broad daylight revealed a kind of plastic sheen, and I assumed it was one of those life-sized zombie decorations. The figure's head lolled forward, and an arm dangled through the fence. A couple of cars passed by without stopping, so I shrugged and drove on. Later that day, local news blew up with a horrifying report. That decoration was actually a dead woman's body. She had been there all night, and everyone, myself included, assumed it was a Halloween prank or prop. In reality, a 31-year-old woman had been murdered and left hanging on that fence in the early hours of October 31st. A resident finally called 911 when they got close enough to see the blood and realize it wasn't fake. I felt sick to my stomach. I had driven right by a corpse, even looked at it, and did nothing because my mind told me Halloween decoration. Police later revealed the gruesome details. She had been beaten to death and hung on the fence, and at least a few neighbors saw the body that Halloween day, but dismissed it as a realistic zombie display. One neighbor was quoted saying, "I thought it was straight out of a horror story. I just thought it was a Halloween zombie." It was the worst kind of horror come to life. The murder investigation unfolded over weeks, and eventually an arrest was made. It turned out to be someone she knew. But the image of that poor woman's body, mistaken for a spooky prop, will haunt me forever. The community was shaken. It made national news that year because of the tragic irony. Now, every Halloween, I have a sobering reminder. Sometimes that which we think is staged gore could be something truly sinister. I no longer assume anything. If I see something that might be a person in distress, or worse, I stop and check or call authorities. Because I'll never forget that morning when what I thought was a clever Halloween decoration turned out to be a real victim. In the end, Halloween had nothing to do with her murder, but it provided the perfect cover for a killer to display their crime in plain sight, and for innocent people like me to drive by, blissfully unaware of the real nightmare right in front of our eyes. When I was about 10 years old, I went trick-or-treating with a girl from my neighborhood, Katie. Our parents weren't with us that year. Katie's older sister was supposed to watch us, but she had wandered off to chat with friends. As naive kids, we felt proud to be out on our own. We approached a small house at the end of a cul-de-sac. It didn't look special in any way, and notably, there were no Halloween decorations at all. Just the porch light was on. In hindsight, that should have been a red flag. We rang the doorbell and called out our cheerful, "Trick or treat." A middle-aged man, maybe in his 50s, opened the door. He wasn't wearing a costume, just a wrinkled t-shirt and jeans. He looked around behind us, probably noticing we had no adults hovering nearby. "Oh, you're all alone? Come on in. I have the best treats inside," he said with a strange smile. Katie, being the braver or more oblivious one, stepped forward as if to enter his house. My stomach dropped. Something about his tone and the empty, dark house behind him made my skin crawl. I grabbed Katie's arm and refused to go inside, stammering that we should stay on the porch. The man's friendly facade slipped. He became insistent. "No, really, I've got full-size candy bars in here." "Don't be shy." He pushed the door open wider, and I glimpsed a cluttered hallway with no lights on. My fight or flight kicked in. I yanked Katie back hard and blurted, "We're not allowed inside strangers' houses. Sorry," and started to back away. The man's expression turned angry. He lunged one step forward across the threshold, his hand reaching out. We bolted. Still holding Katie's arm, I sprinted down the driveway as fast as I could. I heard the man shout something after us, something like, "Come back," followed by the door slamming shut. We didn't stop running until we were 2 streets away, out of breath and terrified. Only then did I explain to Katie that something felt very wrong about that house. Later that night, I told my parents and hers what happened. They were horrified and contacted the police. We never found out if that man actually harmed any other kids, but the police did visit his house to investigate. Whatever his intentions were, I'm just glad we escaped. To the creepy guy who tried to lure 2 little kids inside on Halloween, let's never meet again. Just last year on Halloween, I was a 16-year-old staying in with my 10-year-old brother. Our parents were out at an adults-only Halloween party, and they left us in charge of handing out candy. We were excited at first. Home Alone, lots of candy, and scary movies on TV. Everything was going fine early in the evening. We'd get groups of kids at the door every few minutes. I'd dole out candy while my little brother watched from the staircase, giggling at all the costumes. Around 9 p.m., trick-or-treaters had mostly tapered off. It was fully dark and a bit late for young kids to be out. I was flipping through channels while my brother dozed off beside me on the couch. Ding dong! The doorbell rang, surprising me. I grabbed the candy bowl, figuring it might be some teenagers making a last round. Peeking through our front window, I saw a tall figure in a costume standing on the porch. They were wearing a black hooded cloak and a white mask. It looked a bit like the ghost face mask from Scream, but in the shadows I couldn't be sure. I opened the door partway, keeping the chain latch on. "Trick or treat," a man's voice rasped from behind the mask. He pressed a gloved hand against the door, as if to push it open. "Are your parents home?" he asked. My heart lurched. That's not a normal question for a trick-or-treater. The man just stood there, silent. Even through the mask, I could tell he was staring directly at me. My little brother, curious and unaware of the tension, came up behind me asking who it was. The masked man tilted his head, hearing the child's voice. Then he said quietly, "I have something special for you kids. Mind if I come in for a second?" My blood ran cold. Through the 6-inch gap of the chained door, I firmly said, "No thanks." "Please leave now." Suddenly, he shoved at the door, trying to break the chain latch. I slammed my shoulder against the door with all my weight, screaming for my brother to go hide. The chain strained but held as I struggled against this stranger. I was yelling, "Get out! I'm calling the police!" at the top of my lungs, hoping to scare him off. After a few terrifying seconds of struggle, he abruptly stopped. Perhaps he realized neighbors might hear the commotion. Through the crack, I saw him step back. He spoke one last time, voice dripping with some disdain. "Happy Halloween," almost mocking us. Then he turned and walked into the night. I immediately locked everything and did call the police. By the time officers arrived, the man was long gone. We gave a description, not that there was much to give beyond the cloak and mask. My brother was shaken but safe, and I was praised for thinking fast and not letting the stranger in. We never did find out who it was or what he really wanted, but I have a sickening guess. Now, every Halloween, I'm extra cautious with anyone who comes to the door late. Be careful who you open your door to on Halloween, because not everyone out that night is looking for candy. Back in 2016, during that bizarre killer clown craze, I was a 13-year-old staying over at my cousin's house for Halloween. We lived in a rural part of Tennessee, where houses are far apart. My uncle, a military veteran, and aunt were home, but already asleep since it was past midnight. My cousin, age 12, and I were in the living room, binging horror movies and stuffing ourselves with leftover candy. We'd been joking all night about the clown sightings we'd seen on YouTube, convinced it was all just dumb pranks for views. Being out in the country, we felt pretty safe. After all, almost everyone out there owns a firearm, including my uncle. Any clown stupid enough to come here is gonna be sorry. My cousin laughed. I nervously agreed. Sometime after 1 a.m., we were getting drowsy when we heard a noise outside near the back of the house. A twig snapping, then a shuffling sound. We muted the TV and listened. Probably an animal, we figured. Suddenly, the motion-activated floodlight in the backyard flashed on. Through the window, we could see the yard illuminated, but saw nothing moving. After 10 minutes, the light clicked off. We exhaled, joking that the raccoons must be trick-or-treating late. Not 2 minutes later, thump, heavy footsteps on the front porch. We looked at each other, eyes wide. Who would be knocking at this hour? I crept to the front window and carefully peeked out from behind the curtain. My heart jumped into my throat. There was a person in a clown costume standing on our porch, facing the door. Even under the dim porch light, I could tell the outfit was cheap. Baggy polka dot pants and an off-white clown mask with wild orange hair. I whispered to my cousin what I saw, and he went pale. Suddenly, the doorknob rattled. The clown was trying to open the locked door without even knocking. When it didn't open, I heard a low chuckle from outside, then a slow, deliberate knock, knock, knock. I thought I might pass out from how hard my heart was pounding. We had to wake my uncle, but his bedroom was on the far end of the house. As my cousin moved to go rouse his dad, I decided to bravely call out through the door. Probably a foolish move, but I was running on adrenaline. "We're armed. Leave now." My voice cracked, not very convincing. The creepy chuckle came again, and through the window I saw the clown lean down to peer through the side window, slit next to the door. I stumbled back, seeing those hideous mask eyes briefly. In that exact moment, my uncle flicked on the porch light from inside and yanked open the front door, shotgun in hand. I'll never forget the image. The door swung open to reveal the clown just a few feet away, now illuminated. The mask was even uglier up close, some fake blood smeared around the mouth. The clown man froze in surprise at the sight of the shotgun. My uncle shouted with the authority of a drill sergeant, "Get off my porch, now!" For a split second, the clown just stood there, tilting his head as if considering. Then my uncle fired a warning shot into the air with a deafening boom. That did it. The clown bolted off the porch and sprinted across the yard. My cousin and I ran to the door. We watched as this clown figure disappeared down the driveway toward the woods. Under the moonlight, we could see him pause at the bottom of the hill and turn back for one last look. The clown waved at us slowly, almost taunting. Then he slipped into the trees and vanished. We called the police, and my uncle stood guard outside until they arrived, but they never found the intruder. Apparently, there had been other clown sightings in the area that week. I still get shivers thinking about how he tried the door and stalked around the house. It scares me to think what he would have done if he got inside. Halloween or not, seeing a stranger in a clown mask on your porch in the dead of night is a nightmare come true. Needless to say, I hate clowns now, and that Halloween will forever haunt us. If you enjoyed these scary encounters, Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your take. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. And if you've got a personal scary story you want me to narrate, email it to darklystorieschannel@gmail.com and include title, location, year, and whether you want to remain anonymous. Your experience might be featured in a future episode. Thank you so much for watching.